Hey, amazing viewers. Before we go into this riveting narrative, drop your location in the comments below. We love connecting with you all around the world. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. Let's hit 10,000 subscribers this month together. Your support means everything. A perfect life. Or so I thought. The snow had come early that year, blanketing Newton, Massachusetts in a pristine white cover that made the neighborhood look like something out of a Christmas card. The stately homes in the upscale residential area stood tall, their windows glowing warmly against the cold January evening. A quiet serenity enveloped the street, interrupted only by the occasional crunch of footsteps on icy sidewalks and the distant laughter of children building snowmen in their yards. Inside one of these homes, our home, everything seemed just as perfect. I sat curled up on our large sectional sofa, wrapped in a thick knit blanket, my hand resting protectively on my swollen belly. I was 8 months pregnant, working remotely as a graphic designer while trying to follow my doctor's orders for bed rest. The soft glow of my MacBook screen illuminated my face as I adjusted a logo design for one of my corporate clients. My work had always been a source of pride for me, a piece of my identity that had remained even as my world shifted toward motherhood. The warm scent of apple pie drifted in from the kitchen, a gift from our neighbor, Mrs. Johnson. She had been one of the many people in our community to rally around me, offering support whenever possible. It was comforting, knowing I wasn't alone. But no amount of warmth could shake the growing unease in my chest. "Mom, I made you some tea," a small voice said gently. I looked up to see my 9-year-old daughter, Lily, balancing a steaming cup on a coaster. Her hazel eyes, so full of quiet intelligence, watched me carefully as if assessing whether I was okay. She was still in her school uniform, the key to our house hanging from a thin chain around her neck, something she had worn since she was 6. It was her little badge of responsibility. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, taking the tea. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Lily's face lit up with a small but proud smile. She had always been mature for her age, handling my pregnancy with an understanding that seemed beyond her years. I took a sip of the tea, chamomile, just the way I liked it, and leaned back against the couch. Outside, the wind howled softly, rattling the window panes. The snowstorm predicted for later that night was already making itself known. Just then, the familiar hum of a BMW engine filled the garage. My husband, Gregory, was home. Lily's face brightened at the sound. "Dad's home," she announced, running to the door. I listened as the heavy front door opened, the cold air rushing in before it clicked shut again. Gregory's footsteps echoed through the house, slower than usual. When he appeared in the doorway, I immediately noticed something was off. His custom-tailored dark gray suit was perfectly pressed as always, his expensive leather briefcase still in hand, but his face looked tired, drawn. The lines around his mouth, normally relaxed, were taut with an unreadable expression. "Hey," I greeted, studying him. "I'm home," he said, though his voice lacked warmth. He walked straight past me, heading toward his study. Lily, unfazed, beamed up at him. "Dad, you're home early today." Gregory stopped in his tracks and turned, as if suddenly remembering her presence. Then, as if to make up for something, he handed her a neatly wrapped box. "This is for you," he said. Lily's eyes widened as she tore off the wrapping, revealing the latest iPad Pro. An extravagant gift, one that was neither for Christmas nor her birthday. "Wow. Thank you, Dad," she said excitedly. But even as she admired the sleek new device, I could tell she was puzzled. So was I. Gregory had always been generous, but this was different. It felt like an apology. I glanced at him, but he avoided my gaze. "It's just proof of Dad's love," he muttered quickly before disappearing into his study, shutting the door firmly behind him. The unease in my chest deepened. Lily, still holding the iPad, looked up at me. "Mom, is Dad okay?" I forced a smile. He's just tired, sweetheart. But I didn't believe my own words. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. Gregory had been coming home later and later these past few months, and I had heard whispers from other wives about his supposed dinners with a new hire named Diana. I had brushed it off, until now. That guilty look in his eyes, the sudden lavish gift, the way he had barely looked at me. Something was wrong, but with my due date approaching, I couldn't afford the stress. I had to focus on the baby, on keeping myself healthy. So I pushed the doubts aside, telling myself that I was just being paranoid. I would soon regret that decision. 1 week later, January 15th, it happened earlier than expected. The contractions started in the middle of the night, sharp and unrelenting. I barely had time to register what was happening before we were rushing to Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, the snow falling heavily around us. 4 hours of labor later, our baby boy was born. As I held him in my arms for the first time, his tiny body wrapped in a soft hospital blanket, I felt an overwhelming wave of love. He was perfect. His little fingers curled around mine, his delicate breaths warming my skin. "You did amazing, Mrs. Wilson," my doctor, Sarah Cohen, said with a warm smile. "He's a very healthy boy." I exhaled a shaky breath. Relief, joy, exhaustion. The hospital room was filled with visitors, friends from the PTA, members of our church, neighbors who had come to congratulate us. Bouquets of flowers lined the windowsill, the scent of roses and lilies mixing with the sterile hospital air. But amidst the celebration, there was one person who wasn't smiling. Lily. She stood near the door, clutching her new iPad tightly to her chest, her small frame tense. Her usual bright expression was gone, replaced with something I couldn't quite place. Fear. Something was wrong. "Lily?" I called, my voice gentle. "Come here, sweetheart. Meet your baby brother." But she didn't move. Her hands were trembling. I frowned. "Lily, what's the matter?" She looked at me, her hazel eyes brimming with something I couldn't understand. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said the words that sent ice through my veins. "Mom, please don't take the baby home." I blinked. "What?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, Mom, we can't take him home." I sat up straighter, panic rising. "Lily, why would you say that?" She hesitated, her breath hitching. Then, with trembling hands, she held out the iPad. "Look at this," she whispered. I took the iPad from her, my pulse pounding in my ears. She pressed play. And then, I heard it, a voice I knew all too well. Gregory's. Cold. Emotionless. "Let's proceed with the plan, Diana. After the baby is born." I felt my entire world tilt. Then, a young woman's voice, hesitant but firm. "But can we really do this? Making it look like an accident." A pause. Then Gregory's voice again. "The insurance is already arranged. $250,000. This will start our new life." My breath hitched. My hands trembled. The room spun. And in that moment, I realized the horrifying truth. Gregory was planning to kill our newborn son. The truth that changed everything. The hospital room spun around me. I could hear the soft beeping of the heart monitor, the distant hum of conversations in the hallway, and the faint wail of a newborn somewhere down the corridor. But none of it felt real. None of it mattered. All I could focus on was the voice playing from the iPad. Gregory's voice. "Let's proceed with the plan, Diana. After the baby is born." A pause. Then another voice, softer, hesitant but complicit. "But can we really do this? Making it look like an accident." I felt the color drain from my face. My hand shook as I held the iPad, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Gregory's voice came again. "The insurance is already arranged. $250,000. This will start our new life." "No." No, this couldn't be real. I swallowed hard, my body trembling. My chest tightened, my heartbeat so loud I could barely hear anything else. My husband, my Gregory, the man I had loved, trusted, built a life with, the father of my children. He was planning to kill our newborn son. I barely felt the weight of my baby in my arms. His tiny body was so warm, so innocent, completely unaware of the horror that had just unraveled before me. "Lily," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Where did you get this recording?" She hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of the hospital bed, as if she needed to hold on to something to keep from falling apart. Tears welled in her hazel eyes, the ones she had inherited from me. "I heard him, Mom," she said in a small, trembling voice. "2 weeks ago. I got home early from my piano lesson. I heard voices in the living room. I knew something was wrong." I listened in stunned silence, my mind racing. Lily took a shaky breath before continuing. "He sounded different," she said. "Not like Dad." It scared me. So I used my iPad to record it. I didn't know what they were talking about at first, but then I heard them say, "baby," and "accident," and "Dad." Her voice caught, and she pressed her lips together before whispering, "Dad said it was the perfect plan." I gripped the blanket tightly, trying to keep my world from collapsing. He was going to make it look like an accident. Lily continued, her small voice cracking, "Right after the baby was born." A wave of nausea hit me so hard I thought I might pass out. I turned to the social worker, Julia Morrison, who had been quietly observing. Her expression was grim. She had heard every word. "We need to call the police," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Julia nodded. "Immediately." But before she could reach for her phone, my own rang. I flinched at the sound, my pulse skyrocketing. Gregory. His name flashed across the screen, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. He had no idea I knew. No idea his perfect, well-constructed plan had just fallen apart. I swallowed, my fingers hovering over the answer button. "Caroline," Julia said gently, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Take a deep breath." I did. Then, as calmly as I could manage, I pressed accept and brought the phone to my ear. "Hey," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "Hey, honey." Gregory's voice came through the speaker, smooth, warm, deceptive. "How are you feeling? How's the baby?" I clutched my son tighter, bile rising in my throat at the sheer hypocrisy of his words. He was asking about the baby, the same baby he had been plotting to kill. "He's perfect," I said, my voice hollow. "We're both doing fine." "Good. I was thinking of coming by soon to see you both." I stiffened. My heart pounded against my ribs. Gregory couldn't come here. If he did, if he found out that Lily had exposed him, that I knew everything, I didn't even want to think about what he would do. I needed to buy time. "I'm still really tired," I said quickly. "Maybe later tonight. The nurses said I should rest." There was a pause on the other end. Then he exhaled softly. "Of course," he said smoothly. "You should rest. You and the baby." I gritted my teeth. The way he said it, so casual, so calculated, made my skin crawl. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But he had no idea that I was already one step ahead of him. When I hung up, I turned to Julia. "What do we do now?" She was already dialing a number on her phone. "We get you and your children somewhere safe. Immediately." Lily's hand found mine, gripping it tightly. I squeezed back, my resolve hardening. Gregory thought he had control. He thought he had planned everything perfectly. But he had underestimated 2 things: our daughter and me. An hour later, the hospital room was no longer just a place of rest. It had become a war zone of whispered discussions, hastily made plans, and rising tension. Julia had called law enforcement, And now 2 plainclothes officers stood in the room with us, their faces set in grim determination. "You and your children need to be moved to a safe location immediately," Officer Daniels said. "We'll arrange protective custody while we investigate the recording." My mind reeled. Protective custody. I had gone from being a mother welcoming her newborn son to a woman hiding from her husband within the span of an hour. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. I turned to Lily, who was sitting on the hospital chair, hugging her knees to her chest. She had been so strong through all of this, but I could see the weight of it pressing down on her. "Lily, honey," I whispered, kneeling in front of her. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but I saw the tears threatening to spill. "I didn't want to believe it, Mom," she whispered. I wanted to be wrong. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as tightly as I could. "You were so brave," I murmured. "You saved your baby brother's life." Lily let out a small sob, clinging to me. But there was no time to break down. The officers moved quickly. Within minutes, I was helped into a wheelchair, my newborn son cradled safely in my arms. Lily held onto my hand as we were escorted out of the hospital through a private exit. The cold air hit me like a shock, but I barely noticed. I could only think of one thing. Gregory was expecting me to come home with the baby, but I wouldn't be coming home at all. As we were driven to the safe house, a single thought burned in my mind. Gregory thought he had won. He thought his plan had been perfect. But now, the game had changed, and I was going to make sure he paid for everything. Escaping the rape. The black, unmarked police SUV sped through the snow-covered streets of Boston, its headlights cutting through the thick fog that had settled over the city. The hospital lights faded into the distance, swallowed by the night. I clutched my newborn son against my chest, listening to his tiny breaths, the soft rise and fall of his chest, the only thing keeping me grounded. Beside me, Lily sat stiffly, her small hands gripping the strap of her backpack like a lifeline. She hadn't said much since we left the hospital, but I could feel the tension radiating from her. The weight of what she had uncovered, what she had carried alone for weeks, was finally pressing down on her. I reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "We're going to be okay, sweetheart." She looked up at me, her hazel eyes glistening in the dim light of the car's interior. "Are we really?" she whispered. I wanted to tell her yes, that we were safe now, that we were far away from Gregory and his horrifying plan. But I couldn't, because I knew we weren't. Not yet. In the front seat, Officer Daniels spoke quietly into his radio. "We've got the subject secured and en route to the safe house. ETA 15 minutes. The other officer, Detective Harper, glanced at us through the rearview mirror. "We've arranged a temporary safe house for you, Mrs. Wilson, just until we can officially put Gregory under investigation." Investigation. The word felt surreal. Just this morning, I had been a wife preparing to welcome her newborn into the world. Now I was a woman on the run, trying to protect my children from the man I had once trusted with my life. "How much evidence do you need to arrest him?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Detective Harper sighed. "The recording Lily captured is strong, but we need more. Without a direct confession or physical evidence, Gregory's lawyers could claim it's fabricated." My stomach twisted. Gregory had money, connections. If he sensed something was off, he would cover his tracks. He'd find a way to slip through the cracks of the system, and then he'd come for us. I shivered despite the heat in the car. The reality of our situation was sinking in faster than I could process. Gregory wasn't just some cheating husband caught in a lie. He was a calculated, dangerous man willing to kill his own child for money. And that meant he wasn't going to let us go so easily. The SUV pulled into the driveway of a modest suburban home on the outskirts of the city. It was nothing like our house in Newton. No grand entrance, no landscaped yard. Just an ordinary 2-story brick home, tucked between other ordinary homes. And right now, ordinary was exactly what we needed. Officer Daniels helped me out of the car while Detective Harper carried our few belongings inside. Lightly followed closely, gripping my sleeve like she was afraid I'd disappear. The house was small but warm. Simple furniture, bare walls. It smelled of old wood and coffee, as if someone had lived here recently, but had left in a hurry. "This place is secure," Daniels assured me. "Only a handful of officers know about it. You'll be safe here." Safe. I wanted to believe him. But even as I stepped inside, a strange feeling settled in my chest. A sense of unease, like we were being watched. I turned toward the window, peering through the curtains at the empty street. Snowflakes drifted under the streetlights, covering the pavement in a soft white blanket. No movement. No cars. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. "Mrs. Wilson," Detective Harper said, pulling me back. "There's something else we need to discuss." I turned to him, still holding my son close. "We need to set a trap for Gregory." Setting the to rape. The plan was simple: lure Gregory into making a mistake. They needed him to confess on record. They needed him to slip, to say something incriminating that could be used against him in court. And I was the bait. "I don't like this," I said, pacing the living room. "What if he figures it out? What if he comes after us before we're ready?" Detective Harper leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Gregory thinks you're still in the hospital. He doesn't suspect that you know anything. We have the advantage." I bit my lip. My instincts screamed that this was dangerous. But what choice did I have? Gregory was powerful. He had money, resources. If we didn't act now, he'd find a way to silence us forever. "Fine," I whispered. "I'll do it." Lily looked up at me, her face pale. "Mom, no." I knelt in front of her, cupping her face in my hands. "I have to. Sweetheart, we need to make sure he can never hurt us again." She sniffled, nodding reluctantly. Detective Harper handed me a burner phone. "Call him. Act normal. Tell him you're ready to come home." I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling as I dialed the number. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Caroline." His voice was warm, affectionate. A lie. "How's my beautiful wife?" I forced myself to smile, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm okay," I said softly. "The baby and I are doing well." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." He sounded genuinely relieved. "When can I bring you both home?" I hesitated. "Tomorrow morning." A pause. Then, "Perfect." The way he said it sent chills down my spine. Because I knew what he was thinking. Tomorrow morning, when I came home with our baby, he was going to put his plan into action. He was going to make sure we didn't leave that house alive. The NIJT of or. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the windows made my heart race. I kept my baby close, listening to his tiny breaths, terrified that this might be the last night I held him. Lily lay beside me, curled into a ball, her arms wrapped around her stuffed rabbit, the same one she had since she was a baby. I stroked her hair gently, whispering reassurances neither of us truly believed. Tomorrow was going to change everything, one way or another. The final meeting. The next morning, I sat in the passenger seat of the unmarked car as it pulled up to our home in Newton. The house looked the same as always, pristine, picture perfect. But now it felt like a trap. Gregory was waiting inside, waiting for me. Detective Harper had wired me with a hidden microphone. Officers were stationed nearby, ready to intervene the moment he said anything incriminating. I took a deep breath, glancing at my sleeping son in the car seat, then at Lily, who gave me a small, shaky nod. I stepped out of the car. The front door opened before I even reached it. Gregory stood in the doorway, smiling. "Welcome home, sweetheart." His arms opened wide, inviting, loving. But I saw it now, the lie behind his smile, the darkness in his eyes. I stepped inside, my pulse pounding. This was it. I was about to come face to face with the man who had planned to kill my child, and he had no idea that today I was planning to destroy him. A monster in disguise. I stepped into the house, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every other sound. The warmth of our home, once a sanctuary, now felt suffocating. The rich scent of sandalwood and vanilla, Gregory's favorite candles, filled the air, but instead of comfort, they made my stomach turn. Gregory stood in the entryway, his arms wide open, his face stretched into the perfect imitation of a loving husband. "Welcome home, sweetheart," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. I forced a smile. It's good to be home. Behind me, the unmarked police car remained parked down the street, officers listening in on our conversation through the hidden microphone wired to my blouse. Gregory stepped forward, his cologne a sharp contrast to the fallness of what I knew he had planned. He cupped my face gently, his thumb tracing my cheek. I resisted the urge to recoil. "You must be exhausted," he murmured. "Let me take the baby." Panic shot through me. I tightened my grip on my son, shielding him from Gregory's reach. "He's sleeping," I said quickly. Gregory hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to catch the flicker of impatience in his eyes. Then, just as quickly, his smile returned. "Of course. Let's get you settled in." I followed him into the living room, my legs feeling like lead. Everything looked the same. Our plush cream-colored sofa, the neatly stacked bookshelves, the fireplace crackling with warmth. But I saw it differently now. This wasn't home anymore. It was a crime scene waiting to happen. Playing the part. Gregory poured me a glass of water and sat across from me, studying my every move. "I was so worried about you," he said, his voice laced with concern. "You had me scared, Caroline." I nodded, pretending to be touched by his words. "I know. I just needed some time to recover." He smiled. "Of course. And now we can finally be a family again." My skin crawled. Gregory leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "We should celebrate. I'll cook something special for dinner." The offer sounded normal enough, but my gut told me otherwise. I forced another smile. "That sounds perfect." I was playing a game of survival now. I had to act normal. Keep him comfortable. Let him believe I was still blind to his plan. Then, when the moment was right, I would strike. The first salep. As Gregory busied himself in the kitchen, I quietly reached into my pocket and pressed a small button on my hidden microphone, a signal for the officers outside. I needed to get him talking, get him to say something, anything that would tie him to his plan. I took a deep breath and called out, "Greg?" He turned, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Yeah." I swallowed. I was thinking about what's best for the baby. His expression didn't change, but I saw the way his fingers tightened slightly around the towel. "What do you mean?" I feigned uncertainty. "I mean, this is a big adjustment for us, having another child. I just want to make sure we're ready." Gregory's smile returned, but this time, it didn't reach his eyes. He walked toward me slowly, his voice soft, coaxing. "Sweetheart, what's on your mind?" I hesitated, then whispered, "What if something happened to him?" For the first time, Gregory's mask slipped. His eyes darkened. His expression faltered just a little too long. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "I mean, accidents happen, don't they?" A beat of silence. Then, like a viper sensing an opportunity, Gregory leaned in, lowering his voice. "Accidents do happen," he murmured. My breath caught. I was walking a dangerous line, but I needed more. I needed him to say it. I exhaled shakily. What if something happened to the baby, Greg? Would we be okay?" His jaw tightened, his hand gripping the edge of the counter. Then he whispered the words that sealed his fate. "We'd be more than okay." The microphone caught every word. The final piece. A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. Gregory's entire body stiffened. His eyes flicked toward the entrance, his expression shifting into something unreadable. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked. I shook my head, playing along. "No." His gaze sharpened. Then, slowly, he walked toward the door. I held my breath. The officers were waiting outside. If Gregory tried to run, they would take him down. But then, something I hadn't expected happened. He turned back to me and smiled. A knowing smile. "You called them," he murmured. A chill ran down my spine. Before I could react, Gregory moved fast, too fast. He grabbed the nearest object, a knife from the kitchen counter, and lunged. Toward me. Toward the baby. I screamed, stumbling backward, shielding my son with my body. The door burst open. "Drop the weapon." Gregory barely had time to register what was happening before officers tackled him to the ground, pinning his arms behind his back. The knife clattered to the floor. "Caroline," he gasped, struggling against them. "Caroline, listen to me." But I didn't listen. I didn't care about his lies anymore. As the officers dragged him away, his eyes locked onto mine one last time. And in them, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. For the first time, Gregory was afraid. Because he had lost. And I had won. Aftermat. The house felt empty after they took him away. The weight I had been carrying for weeks, the fear, the uncertainty, the betrayal, finally crashed down on me. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching my son close, my body shaking with silent sobs. Lily appeared beside me, wrapping her small arms around my shoulders. "It's over, Mom," she whispered. I nodded, but I couldn't stop the tears. It was over. Gregory had been arrested. His confession was on record. He would never hurt us again. But the scars he left behind, those would take time to heal. I looked down at my baby's peaceful face, his tiny hands curled into fists. I had almost lost him. Almost. I pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead, a silent promise to him. No one would ever hurt him again. Not as long as I was alive. And not as long as Lily, our little hero, was by our side. We had survived. And now, it was time to start over. A new dawn. The sky was beginning to change. As I sat in the quiet safe house, holding my newborn son against my chest, I watched the first hints of morning light break over the horizon. It spilled through the window in golden hues, warming the otherwise cold, unfamiliar space. Lily was curled up beside me on the couch, finally asleep after what had been the longest night of our lives. She had fought so hard. For me, for her baby brother, and now, for the first time in weeks, she could rest without fear. I ran my fingers gently through her hair, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and sorrow. She had saved us. And she had lost something too. A father. A childhood untouched by betrayal. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. We had survived. But survival wasn't the same as healing. The aftermat. The days that followed Gregory's arrest were a blur of police interviews, legal proceedings, and an overwhelming amount of media attention. The case had shocked everyone. A respected insurance executive, a loving husband and father, secretly plotting the murder of his own newborn child for money. The details of his plan, now public, had turned him into a national disgrace. It didn't take long for Gregory to realize he had lost. The evidence was damning. The recording Lily had captured, the conversation I had baited him into, and the weapon he had grabbed in his final act of desperation. There was no way out for him. His high-powered attorneys tried to argue coercion, claiming I had tricked him, that the recording had been manipulated, but no amount of legal maneuvering could erase the truth. Gregory Wilson was going to prison for a long, long time. And yet, even after his sentencing, I still struggled to let go of the fear. For weeks, I found myself looking over my shoulder, flinching at sudden noises, unable to shake the feeling that he was still lurking somewhere in the shadows, waiting for his moment. But he wasn't. He was gone, and I refused to let him haunt me any longer. Moving forward. 1 month later, I packed up the last of our belongings. Lily stood beside me, holding a cardboard box filled with her favorite books and stuffed animals. She had been unusually quiet all morning, her small face thoughtful as she watched me seal another box. "Mom," she finally said. I turned to her. "Yeah, sweetheart." She hesitated, then asked, "Are we ever coming back here?" I looked around the house. Our house. The place where I had built a life. The place where I had once felt safe. Now, it was nothing more than walls and memories, some of them beautiful, but most of them stained with betrayal. "No," I said softly. "We're not coming back." Lily nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "Good." She turned away, walking over to her baby brother, who was babbling in his carrier on the floor. She knelt down, her fingers brushing his tiny hand. "I'll always protect you," she whispered to him. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Lily wasn't just my daughter. She was his guardian angel. A new home, a new life. We moved to a small town in Vermont, far from the memories of Newton, Massachusetts. The house wasn't as big, but it was warm and filled with light. It sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees, where the air was fresh, and the neighbors waved kindly as they walked by. For the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed freely. Lily adjusted faster than I expected. She made new friends, started playing piano again, and even began writing stories. She had seen more darkness in 9 years than most people did in a lifetime, yet she still carried light in her heart. And my son, he thrived. He grew stronger every day, his laughter filling the house, reminding me that life had given us a second chance. One evening, as I sat on the porch, rocking my son to sleep, Lily joined me with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up at the sky, her eyes reflecting the fading colors of sunset. "Mom." "Yeah." She hesitated before asking, "Do you think Dad ever really loved us?" I sighed, considering my words carefully. I said slowly, that some people love in the only way they know how, but that doesn't mean it's the right way." She nodded, absorbing my words. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder, her small fingers finding mine. "I'm glad you didn't take the baby home," she whispered. I tightened my grip on her hand. "So am I." We sat there in silence, watching the stars blink to life above us. The past would always be a part of us, but it wouldn't define us. We were free now, and for the first time in a long time, I knew we were going to be okay. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.